Hello, hello. We're going to be, we're live, but we're going to start talking in just a second.
How about right now?
Just a second.
Just a second?
Yes. Hey, Andre.
Hey, Tara.
How's it going?
It's going all right. It's going all right.
It's going all right?
It's
awesome.
Going all right. Yeah.
Okay, here we are. It's Monday. Regular bat station, regular bat time.
Yeah. Does it feel regular? It doesn't feel regular to me. Nothing feels regular anymore.
I know. It feels like things have been a bit up in the air. I've been sick.
Since March 2020, the world has been much different. Since the COVID announcement, it's never been the same since. It's always changing. The same.
I feel like there's too much. There we go. There's more you. Okay. Well, it's Monday at 11 a.m. So that means we're here to talk to you about another topic around being open or polyamorous or non-monogamous.
Yeah.
We've done like almost 2 years.
About 250,000, I think.
250,000 of them. Yeah. So if you're ever looking for, if you're just joining us for the first time and aren't familiar with what we do talk about a topic around polyamory every week, and we have done that for the last, I'd say, year and a half at least.
Yeah.
So there's tons of topics. If you can't find something, just message us and let us know, and we'll get you there. So today's topic is 10 quick ways to be more generous in your polyamorous relationships.
Generous. Huh?
Generous, yeah.
That's a great idea. We should always try to be more generous, I think, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because I think philosophically it comes from this idea that the more you give, the more you get. But it goes, it's often counterintuitive, right? Often people think that there's a finite amount, whether it's love or resource, and there's some scarcity, and we want to naturally grab, right? We want to grab our share, we want to grab for it. And that's fine. Maybe we do get our share, but it's wonderful when we feel secure enough to be generous and we give it out and then we receive. Not even if it's automatically reciprocated from the other person, but the feeling that we receive in being light and heart, generous, holding life in the loose garment.
Yeah, exactly. I think, generosity for me would be defined as being selfless and being willing to give freely without expectation of return. So, but we asked this in the group, and you guys had some really great answers around how are you generous in your relationships, or how do people show generosity to you? So let us know in the chat what, if there's some things, because I think we could all learn from each other. I mean, that's the point of this group, is to be able to learn from each other.
Yeah.
So,
but what's so amazing? The spirit of it, that's what I keep coming back to, because I think the demonstration might be, the manifestation might be seen in generosity, but it's the spirit of which it is. And what happens is, when I'm with somebody who's very generous, I find myself wanting to be generous as well.
Yeah.
And I get that from you, because you've always been very, very generous. So it inspires me to be one, to want to be giving and generous as well. It's beautiful. So it can become inspiring to others, or we might witness it in others and recognize it, and then see if we're able to demonstrate something similar.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
Yeah. And I think it's differentiating being generous to being a people pleaser. I think there's a big difference between the two, because some people are like, oh, in polyamory, we need to be autonomous. We don't need to be people pleasing and all that stuff. And so we're not promoting being a people pleaser. But it's more about how we can be more generous in our relationships. Okay. So we have 10 ways.
All right. Well, let's jump into it.
Okay. What 10 ways. Yeah. So if you have ideas, just drop them all in the chat as we go.
But I'm excited to hear this. I'm listening. What do you got? That's
a good segue into number one, which is listening.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what was that? Listening? Yeah, listening to your partner, right? So how do I listen? Am I, kind of half there and just like, yeah, okay, whatever. And were you listening to what I said? Oh yeah, you said something about being half there, blah, blah, but really, I'm not present. I'm not there, right? So can I listen actively? What does that mean to listen actively?
Active listening, my favorite, is listening.
We go over it all.
But it's important.
It sure is.
Active listening is listening to understand, not to respond.
So when we're talking, already when you say something, it inspires me, it triggers me, I've got a response or whatever it is, and now I've stopped listening, and now I'm already formulating my response. Okay, I'm going to tell that, and now I've left the conversation. I've stopped listening to you. I don't know what the last thing you said was. I wasn't there. I've already formed my thing. I might recognize that, and I might invite myself to come back and be, wait a second, let me see if I can be present, because I would like, when I'm speaking, the other person to recognize me and be present, right? And it creates that feeling. It's a generous spirit. So I give of myself to listen. I'm wanting to hear you and be present.
Yeah.
And it creates a feeling, right? And then when I'm there for you, you might then be inspired to say, well, you know what? I see that he's able to be present. I want to do the same. I want to feel that way.
Yeah. So listening is part of the formula to effective communication, is being a good listener, but also being a good speaker. And it's something that we talk about in the training that we do in our program and with our clients around attunement communication and how you do that. And there's a lot to it. We can talk about that another time. But listening is the key part.
And how to be a good speaker. You're absolutely right. So do I simply want to go out there and have a great monologue where I'm pontificating and I'm, just speaking at people? Or do I want to speak openly from my heart and announce how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking? And do I speak from the I position that can never be invalidated, can always be recognized? Or am I simply using broad statements like, you always do this, you never do that, which, it's a whole nother kettle of fish. We'll go into that another time, but right now we're going to say, so yeah, how to be a good listener and a good speaker.
I was going to say, because you mentioned about having a big, long monologue, and this is something I talk about with clients all the time, is sometimes when we want to have a conversation with our partner, we want to layer on all the various things, all the complaints, all the things that we're not happy with and that sort of thing. And I think what happens is so many things are added on, and I think that then triggers the listening to respond rather than listening to understand. And also then the person is focused on probably the last thing you said, which may be the worst thing. So, I mean, that can get you into trouble. So being generous is part of being generous, is of listening.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. When I'm putting out the laundry list and I'm saying 35 different things, where does it leave the other person? They're wanting to do that. So think about when you're sharing that you might make it in bite-sized pieces, right?
Like one thing at a time.
Yeah, and then we can go through part by part and find out where are we with this and try to make it resolve. We'll get to it. It might take some time, but we'll do it one by one. But if we try to bombard the person with everything that's in there, it might not come out with the desired effect. So be cognizant of that when we're doing it. So,
and we've experienced that recently, recently as yesterday.
We sure have,
Not with us, but with others. But it's really hard when that happens to listen and,
Well, you got to catch yourself, right? Because, we had a rather trying weekend in some ways, very rewarding in other ways. Yes. But there were times when I felt myself becoming activated in the situation or by the other person. And I had to invite myself to remain calm and be able to recognize what part of it was theirs, what part of it was mine, and how could I be less affected. I will choose how affected or unaffected I will be by any situation. It's an inside job.
Yeah. And I remained activated for most of yesterday. In fact, I had a hard time sleeping because of it. And then it was funny because this morning, because you said a lot of things yesterday that I think were really helpful and that really kind of fed in. And then part of what I was doing that felt this morning was being more generous in how I was viewing the situation. So
you certainly were, yeah.
So thank you for that.
Well, two things there. One is a good night's sleep. And two, sometimes we need to take a pause from it and have a break and say, okay, you know what? I need to just breathe. I need to compose myself. I need to take a little respite. It's not to say we're never going to adjust these things. We're never going to come back to it. But at times we might need that form of self-care where it says, okay, it's been satisfied. It's saturated. It's enough. And I need to pause for a minute, please.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're lovable people that can respect that and offer us that form of generosity as well. Right? We don't have to impose our will upon the other person. All right.
So that was number one, is listening.
Yeah. And it kind of touched on
topic.
It sure was. And it kind of touched on number two.
Yes.
Which is being fully present.
Yes. Right? We can be generous by being fully present.
Yeah. So what does it mean to actually be present? Because I'm here. I'm in the front. But am I really emotionally present? What does it mean to be fully present?
Giving someone your full attention, not being distracted by other things. Okay. I mean, listening is one aspect of that, which we already talked about, but also just being in the moment. If you're with a partner, whichever partner, if you have multiple partners, is, being present with them and in those moments with them and not working on not being distracted by outside things, being on your phone with other people or that sort of thing. So if you've decided to spend time with someone, then being present in that moment with them. What were you thinking?
Well, about the time part. So I find that if I'm thinking about past hurts or past memories, good or bad, I'm in the past. And if I'm thinking about the future things, I'm in the future. Being in the past or being in the future is not really being present. So I will be aware of these things and try to observe when I might go to these other locations. Maybe I'll look at why I'm doing that, but regardless, but I will reinvite myself to come back and be present and just be in the moment.
Oh yeah, I like that. Yeah. I was thinking, about the past, but it's also the future. Sometimes people future forecast and worry about things and can't be in the present. Yeah. So that's another thing.
Yeah. So just look at what your motive might be, what's taking you out of there, and what would it be like to invite yourself to come back. Invite yourself with generosity. Invite yourself without judgment. So I went into the future, went into the past. Okay, I observe it, but I invite myself to come back, or I invite my partner to come back. You might have been someplace else, and that's fine. But would you be willing and able to come back and be with me now? So we'll see about that.
Okay, awesome. I'm noticing, because my phone is open here, that we have it does the automatic closed captions. So I think we might need to speak slower.
Okay. And enunciate.
Enunciate.
Okay.
Red
leather, blue leather.
So number 1 was listening. Number 2 is being fully present. And number 3 is offering support and encouragement.
Yeah.
And I think this is where some of the things around attachment come into play. Like, so being supportive and encouraging by being a safe haven for someone and as being a secure base. So secure base being a place to which, in your relationship, your partners can grow from and know that there's a secure base for them to come back to, and that you're there to love and support and encourage them. And then also a safe haven in which they can come back and, if they're hurt or they need to talk about something, or, being there for them when they're having a harder time and that sort of thing. So that's another way of being generous.
Yeah. It makes it, when you say about the safe haven and the secure attachment, it makes me think about the ability to offer an ear or a shoulder or a mouthpiece. So, I'm not feeling it. I'm feeling disturbed, whatever it might be. And maybe sometimes I just want to be comforted with a shoulder or an ear, right? Sometimes to just hear it. And other times, maybe I'm in a paper bag and I don't know how to get my way out of it, and I need the advice. But sometimes I might be wanting simply the shoulder. So I think a wonderful thing, and I don't necessarily practice this to perfection. In fact, I'd like to try and integrate it more. Can I offer you? Yes. Can I offer you? Can I ask you? Can I intuit whether you were wanting a shoulder and an ear or some advice?
Yes, and we actually just started doing that, because I think there's a couple situations that came up where I was jumping into like coaching mode or therapy mode. And in those moments, you just wanted me just to listen and just to comfort and just to be supportive and listening. And, the other stuff can come later, but at that moment, so we started saying, advice or shoulder. And that's been helping us.
Mouth or ear.
Mouth or ear. Yeah. Well, that can be interpreted differently.
But I think it's good to know that we have the safe haven where we can go and then come back, and that object constancy. But at the same time, it's also how will we be received? Is it a safe haven for me to say everything? Can I just fall into you and allow for that expression for that moment?
I think it'd be good to explain object constancy, because some people don't know that term.
Sure. So I think the easiest example is peekaboo, right? So the little child is growing up, and we close our eyes and they panic. Where did the person go, right? Where's my caretaker? They don't see us. And we reappear and, fantastic, they're there, it's okay. And we cover up our eyes and where did they go? And we reappear. And in time, what happens is we cover up our face, they can't see us, but they know that we're there.
Yes.
They know that the object will be there. Object constancy, right? So it is consistent in our psyche that the person's still there. Well, the same holds true later on in life, right? Many say that life is a repetition of the first 18 months of life. Well, we keep applying these things. So here I am. I want to connect with somebody. I might not have the most secure attachment formations in the past, but I want to connect. I want to feel that it's okay. Can I rely on the other person? Do I know that they're still going to be there? Will I have that sense of object still, even when they're not there.
Yes.
And it's not only from the other person. It might have to be first we'll demonstrate it with ourselves, but eventually we can come to a point where we feel secure in being in these type of relationships.
And that's part of creating secure attachment.
Exactly.
And having that object constancy. So that's good.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And if you don't have it, if you've never been exposed to it, if you've never felt comfortable, it's not to say that's how it's always going to be. You can learn secure attachment.
You can.
In fact, I will be the first to admit that I did not always have a secure attachment, but I feel much more comfortable in being in intimate relationships now, both sexually, physically, and emotionally.
Yeah,
so
there's definitely things you can do. And we did do a talk on attachment, so that's in the guides.
A big part of our program is addressing attachment.
Yes.
Relationships.
Knowing what our attachments are and then working on it. Because I think commonly, I'm not sure if you find the same, but when I've worked with couples or talked to people who are in coupled situations, is that often people who are anxiously attached end up with people that are avoidant. And I mean, it's because it serves a certain thing, but then it also becomes the rub that becomes, and it can become an issue.
That's right.
If people are more leaning in one direction. So.
But when we explore these things, we start to unpack them. We find out, well, actually, they're kind of sort of easy to understand after a while, and you can see the patterns. You can say, "Oh, yeah, I recognize that," and then we have very good ways of countering it or working with it, so we can feel secure, and we can invite others in our lives to feel secure as well. So there is hope for that.
Making noise. Someone's asking if there's a secure attachment workshop. We don't have a specific workshop on secure attachment, but we did do a talk on attachment and talked about how you can be more securely attached. We just touched on the surface of it, but it is a component of our program, Open Relationship and Polyamory Mastery. So if you have questions, I'm not sure, I can't see who's talking because it says Facebook user, but sorry, my phone keeps making noise.
Do you have a preference for people to sign in using some type of pronoun or not pronoun, but some type of way that we might address them other than Facebook user? What should they do? Where should they do that?
Oh, they need to go to, well, it's interesting because I don't think it's working because I can see my comment where I put at everyone to let people know that we were live says Facebook user. And I've done that several times. It's supposed to be facebook.com/StreamYard. I don't know what's happening with StreamYard. It might be because Facebook's changing things, but today's broadcast, for example, I set it up for 11. I double checked it last night. And then this morning, similar to last week when I went on, it said 3 o'clock. And so I don't know. Anyways, thanks, Drang. Hope you're feeling better. See, I can see your name. Yes, I still have throat irritation and a bit of stuffiness, but getting much better. So thank you. Okay.
Back to our list.
To our list.
Number 4, gifts of touch
and physical. Yeah, so that's ways we can be generous is being physical. And I think you talked a bit about it in terms of offering support and encouragement if somebody needs something. But I think sometimes, and it also relates to being present, is sometimes we need physical touch. And that can be a way we can be generous if our partners are wanting that sort of thing. So that's another thing, not going like, hold my hand, if they're like, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah, we got to be able to read the room, right?
Yeah.
Take the temperature. And we can even ask them, how would you feel if I were to, or is it okay if I do this? Or, is this okay? Some way that we can recognize our own motive. So you're feeling uncomfortable. That makes me feel uncomfortable. I want to comfort you, but you might not necessarily be wanting that. So let me observe my own motives, find out where I'm at, and then get the consent, get somehow some recognition, some check-in, and then maybe it's just as simple as a pat on the back or just like, touching somebody and like, I see you, I recognize you, I feel you, and we're good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important. It's the little things that seem so obvious at times, but these little things can often unfortunately go neglected, or we don't even recognize them, or we don't even know that they're available to us, and yet they could speak volumes. They could really help feel that feeling of connection. Right?
Yeah, I think sometimes when we're in relationships with people for a long time, we forget to do those simple things. Like when we were first dating, we held hands and stuff like that, but maybe we don't do it now. And touch is so important. And I think sometimes touch is a really good way, like simple touch, non-sexual touch is a great way of getting back to connecting and desire and stuff like that. And again, that's another thing we talk about in our program is how to rebuild desire and things like using sensate focus and starting with touch as a way of re-entering, especially if there's been a loss of trust or any of those things that have happened. Sometimes doing that sort of thing will help bring people together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, the idea of it being non-sexual, right? Because if there's a breach of trust or there's some distance or whatever it was, that desire to connect sexually might be wonderful, but it might be too much at the moment. So invite it by less promotion, more attraction.
Yeah, like when we're feeling hurt, it's really hard. I know for me personally, there were some things that happened over the weekend that made me feel hurt. And so part of me was like, I wanted touch, but part of me was like, I just didn't want to be, I didn't want it. You know what I mean? And I wanted to connect, but there was something different I needed. So it's also knowing what the thing is the other person needed. Like I told you yesterday, I needed some words of affirmation. That was what was important to me in those moments. So.
But I love that you're able to articulate your needs like that, right? To say like, I need tenderness, I need quiet time, I need whatever it is that we should feel as though we are well within our rights to announce our preferences, what we're wanting.
But we can be generous in finding out what it is that our partners want. So, okay, great. So number 5.
Okay. Being generous in terms of gifts of service. So if we're nesting, supporting our partner in cleaning the place before they have a date coming up. You came up with that, right? So I have a date tonight, second date. I'm probably not going to culminate in my inviting them back here, but it's possible.
You never know.
You never know. But you came up with the act of generosity that you would help me kind of, clean up the place a little bit if necessary. But it's very generous of you to consider what it might be like for me to want to bring this person back here. And will I reciprocate, right? So hopefully I'll be able to do that as well. And I'll say, well, she's got a date tonight. She's got the place. And I know that I would appreciate if she helped me clean up when I have a date. So I will be generous in that spirit as well. It's reciprocating the idea towards it.
Oh, look, it's Kate and Zach. They're in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh, hello.
Hey. Oh my God, I'm so happy you're joining us. I hope your trip's awesome.
Yeah, 2 of our beautiful friends have left from, I hope you don't mind what I'm saying, but from Montreal, Canada, Quebec. And they're going to go by motorcycle all the way down to the tip of South America and beyond, perhaps, for an epic year-long plus journey. Wow. So.
Oh, I'm so happy you guys joined us. That's so sweet.
And thank you for taking us with you.
Yeah. So and I know you like the place clean, and I'm not always the best at helping you with that. So that's something that I'm going to do. But the other gift of service I'm doing is also making other plans so that if you should want to come back here, that I'm not here going, hey, and like, having, so I would see that as a gift of service too. So I'm going to go hang out with my friend for the evening and the late afternoon evening. And then, we'll see what happens.
Awesome.
So that's a gift of service.
And I appreciate your generosity in the spirit of that. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other gifts of service. That was just an idea, the cleaning one, because it's timely. But I'm sure you guys can come up. Is there any gifts of service that you like to do for your partners that would that feel generous?
Right. Okay.
Awesome. So give us some examples. We love examples.
Yeah. Okay. So number 6 would be our time.
Time. Being generous with time.
Right. So being generous is sharing time. So your partner, so they can see other partners.
Yeah. Well,
So I don't want to monopolize all of your time. I should afford you opportunities to go out and do the things that we do, which is having other relationships, right? Whether they're physical, emotional, sexual, whatever they might be. So I'm not wanting to simply dominate all your time. I appreciate that you are an individual with other relations. So I say, yes, go out and do these things, have this full experience, come back when you want and when you're ready, and tell me all about it or not. But we'll have room for that outside without even necessarily having to ask for it, right? Because sometimes it's a little bit difficult to say, I love being with you, but hey, I want to have like a little bit of time to myself, right? So it's often wonderful when we can say, you know what, I've been having a wonderful time with you. Why don't you take like a day or two to yourself and do whatever, whatever that thing might be. Yeah. So it's nice to consider the other person. I think generosity and consideration come very much hand in hand.
Yeah, and if you are nesting, you can find ways of creating space in your own space. Like we don't have a huge place here, but we do find ways of doing that. Like yesterday, for example, I wasn't feeling well and I was tired, and I stayed upstairs in the bedroom and knit and watched my show. And I just wanted to do that. You brought me a tea, which was super generous and a good gift of service, I guess you could say. And we just kind of did our own thing for a bit.
Yeah.
So we can be generous with our time in giving our partners. Sharing our time, not monopolizing, but we can also be generous in terms of the quality time we have together. We talked a bit about
that's also such a great point, right? Because I've got the wife, I've got the kids, I've got the boss, I've got the car, I've got the hockey, whatever, all these things, and it's like I pay all these other things first, and then you're there, and it's like, oh man, I'm sorry, like I'd love to go to, but I got this and I got that and I got this. And it's like, when do I make time, quality time for me and us?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so,
one of the things I work with with my clients is they sometimes say, "Oh, I don't have time for this," and I'm in a "I don't have time for this. I'm busy. And then until a coach of mine and also a friend told me, "Is like, do you think you control your time?" And it was like, no, I have work, I have this, I have that, I can't do my taxes, whatever it is, right? The whole like taxes story. I can't get 2 years of taxes done. Of course, I have time to do that. I'm not prioritizing it, and I'm not choosing how I spend my time. So part of it, one of the things I talk to clients about sometimes is a not to-do list. Like, what are the things that you don't need to do? Can you like automate, delegate, or eliminate? What are those things, right? Yeah. And how much time do you spend on things that are not moving you closer to the things that you want? So if you want to have a connected experience with your partner, how are you, like you said, paying yourself first, putting that time, maybe making it a non-negotiable in your day, that we have a time for connection every day, or we have a time for connection every week if you're farther apart, whatever it is. So time. Time's super important.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, though, and how I like to say I've matured over time, because in the past, when I would have potential partners, like they would say something to me like, "Oh, I know that relationships take a lot of work, or I'm willing to put that kind of work in." And I thought, work? Like, what kind of work is this? Like, what is that work? It should go just easy and free. But sometimes the work is being cognizant of what it takes to meet the needs of your partner or your own needs, right? So therein lies the work. And I think that it's through that work, we reap the profits of those investments. So it's important to do that work if need be. Okay.
Exactly. So that was number 6, was time.
Number 7, supporting of a partner's ideas. Decisions.
Yeah, so you can be generous in supporting decisions that maybe aren't the ones that you might have made.
Right. Even in their decision or preference for certain people.
Exactly.
So ideally, in a perfect world, I love all my metamors and I think they're all fantastic. But if I should come across one where they and I don't necessarily mesh, well, it's not really that important that I be the one. They're not my lover, they're my lover's lover, right? So in a way, like, I want to be generous of spirit to say, well, maybe they're not the person I would prefer, and as long as they're not dangerous,
dangerous, or wasn't a safety concern,
right? Yeah. Then it's like, well, can I tolerate them, even if they're not my preference? Can I be generous enough to let you have your experience with them without my influencing it through my own transference? I don't like John because he reminds me of my 4th grade teacher. Well,
and I hated my 4th grade teacher.
Right, but then it kind of taints your experience of it. Yes. So could I be generous enough to say, you know what? It's your life. You do it, and I will be that safe, loving, supportive haven for when you come back.
Yeah, because I think sometimes other things may feed why you don't like this partner too, and being aware of that as well. Because there could be things. I mean, I've had partners of yours. I'm like, I didn't want you to see them, because I was jealous of them because of whatever stupid story I made up in terms of them and them, compare and despair and all that. But I did want to mention because you mentioned a word, metamor.
Yes.
Metamor, and that was some people, if they're new, may not know that word. Right. So
a metamor is a fancy word, very beautiful word for describing your lover's lover. So Tara, you'll be my lover, and if you have someone that you're seeing, lover, partner, yes, then the person on that other side would be my metamor. So if I'm dating somebody and we have a nice relationship, they would be your metamor.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would be somebody else's metamor for them.
Yes.
So it's the one-over relation.
Exactly. And sometimes people use metamor, that term, in also aligned with kitchen table polyamory.
I thought you were going to say polycule. What's a polycule?
A polycule is a group of people that have a relationship together. So maybe, I think it's usually 4 or more.
Yeah, usually 5, but 4 or 5. Yeah.
Yeah, 4 or more.
So a triad is not a polycule? It could be.
Well, it has its own name. I think a polycule is anything more than 3, because a 3 has a name, a triad. Some people call it a. A 4 can be a quad. That's true. And then there's people have different types of things, whether the polycule is an open or closed polycule.
But that's a whole. Essentially, a polycule is a group.
A group of people
by amorous or
and they may or may not have relationships with each other, but there's usually interaction, I think, between people. There's some sort of relationship.
Right.
But kitchen table polyamory is where the idea that you could sit around the table with your partner and all their partners. So you and all your metamors, you get together, you're friends, that sort of thing. And for some people, it's the ideal. And for some people, it's not necessary. And I think it doesn't have to be the thing. I think some people, there's a myth that you have to know and be friends with your metamor. And I think that is definitely a myth. Like, you don't have to love them. You do not have to hang around with them. You do not have to know them as people.
Well, I have a ton.
If you
and
don't
I mean
want
a ton of metamors I've never met.
You're so full of shit.
No, it's true.
But so part of like supporting a partner's decisions is also not undermining things. So not undermining or sabotaging, but being supportive of them and having their own experiences. Yeah. That safe haven and secure base. It kind of goes back to that, right? You're the secure base from which your partner can grow and have experiences and that sort of thing.
But I think there's the danger of you growing away, which could happen regardless. But there's also the wonder of growing, having experience, and coming back and sharing it with your partner.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So number 8.
Making the best assumptions.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? Can you put that one on there?
Well, originally I had written it as not making negative assumptions, which is part of this. But I think when making lists, I like to phrase things in the positive. So I want to make the best assumptions about my partner, and rather than focusing on the negative or what could be. So it's about assuming the good things. You know your partner, who they are. They're not a monster. So if you're feeling jealous or triggered in some ways, I think sometimes we get this idea in our head that our partner is a monster, which is crazy. And I mean, I heard this from clients that I worked with, and they use that term. So I'm not making it up. I don't think I've ever really felt of you as a monster, but it can if things are escalated to a point where you're so triggered or so jealous or have such extreme emotions that we actually forget who our partner is. So when you make the best assumptions, we're assuming the best of them. We're assuming that they're going to make decisions that support your agreements and that sort of thing.
So if I'm feeling you to be a monster, I'm probably not being accurate, and I'm probably not assuming the best about you. I'm simply assuming the worst. I'm attaching all these feelings of hurt, negativity, whatever it is, onto you, as opposed to seeing you in a more accurate way. But if you are with a monster, then the question is, what is it surfing for you? What brings you to that point where you would be in a relationship with a monster? And then maybe we should talk sooner rather than later. Yeah,
and that's always a possibility. Some people can be doing things to hurt the relationship. And, you obviously want to be aware of that. I'm not suggesting that you ignore it, but I think not jumping to conclusions or making negative assumptions.
Right. Because we can have negative transfers towards a situation or a feeling and then put it onto that other person as though they are the monster. But in fact, they might not have that much power.
No, exactly. And I mentioned about agreements, and I think this is what, and we've done a talk about agreements as well, and why, agreements are important. I mean, we talk about making values-based agreements. So things you agree to with your partners based on what you value, rather than on like rules and that sort of thing. So when you have good agreements, then, the assumption is that you would be keeping those agreements unless there has been a lack of trust. And then that's the area which you need to work on.
Right.
And we did talk about trust too. That was one of our other talks.
Rebuilding trust.
Rebuilding trust when it's lost and establishing trust. We did too.
Yeah, well, it's a big thing, and it's not an easy thing, but it can be done. Again, it's like object relations, right? So we can create those secure attachments. We can come back from violations of trust. When we're open and honest about it.
Okay, so making good assumptions was number 8. So number 9.
Being generous in spirit.
Yeah, being generous in spirit. So, this could be a stretch for some, and this was definitely tested for me this weekend. I don't think I did so well in it. In some ways I did, and in some ways I didn't in the moment. But being generous towards others when they may not be towards us.
Yeah, that's hard, right? Because sometimes, life creates situations, people create scenarios where it could be triggering, and we might automatically want to go in a more defensive stance, which could often be aggressive, but we are not being we're not benefiting from this position. In fact, we are taxing ourselves by having this negative position. If we can look at it and assess it for what it really is, we can be less affected by it and say, okay, this is a difficult, challenging time perhaps, but I'm going to be generous with myself and not have to bite on what's being offered.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think in the moment, I behaved in a way that I think was generous in spirit, but after the fact, I had a complete and utter meltdown and was not that way. And then revisiting the situation today, I was able to, with your support, of course, because you're revisit that with a different eye towards being more generous in spirit and what might have been triggering for that person and why they behaved in a certain way. And it doesn't change their behavior, but it changes my understanding of the situation and allows me to approach it in a different way of understanding.
Right. So how will we be affected, or how little will we be affected? We will determine. But it's also the idea, as you say, that makes me think about, so yesterday maybe didn't go as perfect as it could have, whatever that means. But can I forgive myself? Can I be generous with myself to say, well, I did the best I could. I did what I thought was the best at that time. Can I be generous to forgive myself? Because it's hard to forgive others if we can't forgive ourselves.
Oh yeah, I've definitely had couples where I've worked with where there's something that happened and the person that committed the offense, so to speak, I don't know how else to say it, part of what the other person had forgiven them, but the reason they were both having a hard time letting it go was because they had, the person had done the thing, hadn't forgiven themselves. And doing that was a huge part of them coming together and rebuilding their trust and their relationship and everything, is forgiveness.
Yeah, for sure. And I find one of the easiest ways to forgiveness is to remain curious. So what prompted me? What was going on that I thought or felt this way? And then when we start to unpack and look at it, honestly, you might say, well, it seems rather understandable that I would have felt this way, or reasonable, or, maybe I was just letting my emotions get the best of me, or I was tainted by a situation and I recognize it, but I can understand it. And now I can use that data to inform me as to how I might go into the next scenario. Can I be cognizant and say, well, you know what? I don't want to be re-triggered by this. I don't want to feel this. I understand that this person might be coming from this way or that way, or I can take these actions to make myself feel more secure. I can turn to a supportive partner, other friends, family, whatever it is, and be able to use that data to forgive ourselves simply by being curious about it and finding out what was that play that created these scenarios.
And in that situation yesterday, I think I'm glad I reacted in the way that was. I apologized to the person. I really de-escalated in the moment. It was totally contrived. I can tell you it was not how I was feeling, but I'm glad I did that because that was actually the right thing. And looking back at it, that was the right response in that moment in front of that person, even though I had a meltdown after. I'm coming to it today with a view that that was the right thing to do and was to apologize. And I'm glad I did. And
I thought you were stellar.
I know, but it was so hard and I didn't want it to get worse. And I'm sorry if I made things difficult for you in that situation.
Mama always said that character came through those tough times and how we would conduct ourselves and what we would learn from it.
Yeah. I think she would have liked me to have responded the way I did.
I think so too.
She might not have liked my meltdown after.
Practice, not perfection.
But I actually was talking to her last night and saying, I know the truth, I know the things, and that's what we gotta go with anyways. Cool. Okay, so generous with forgiveness of ourselves and our partners and other people because they may not know, they do not know what they do sometimes. I think people don't always know how they're behaving or why they're behaving in a certain way. That person certainly didn't, and they had their own things going on.
Yeah, we might not know. For them to us and us to them, we might not know to what degree those things might affect each other, right? So let's be cognizant of that. So number 10, the last one. 10. Generous with gifts of self.
Yeah, gifts of self.
Okay.
Well, this was inspired by some of the responses in the group.
Yeah, great response.
Yeah, I love it. So I think being generous with gifts of self. So the gifts that you have and being generous with others, especially our partners and the people that we love and care about. So I loved Angela's response was a gift of vulnerability, to be fully open and allow oneself to be seen deeply by a partner. I think that's a really great gift of self, is to be vulnerable,
And again, that right away makes me think again about being feeling secure,
Mhm.
right? That you are able to have those vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
And even if you don't necessarily feel that secure in the relationship yet, you might find ways to self-support and make yourself feel secure so that you can remain vulnerable to a certain degree and know that it is survivable. Because when we are vulnerable, we invite intimacy.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for some people to be vulnerable, especially depending on your attachment style, right?
Yeah,
you may not allow yourself to be vulnerable because of the way you grew up, or how how people that you loved were when you were vulnerable and you had to protect yourself. But I think it's always such a great gift of generosity to be vulnerable with our partners. It allows people to know and love us more.
Absolutely.
And if like you said, if it doesn't turn out the way we want, then maybe that's a good thing, because we want to be able to be vulnerable.
Be vulnerable with the sense that we can be secure in our vulnerability, right? Knowing that the bottom isn't going to just continue to fall out, but that we are okay in expressing vulnerabilities. In fact, some people argue that it is a display of strength to show our most vulnerable areas, that we can feel secure that way. So if you're not yet feeling that secure, there are definitely things we can do to help improve that, right? To strengthen our ego, to increase our feelings of esteem, self-esteem, so we feel secure in those ways. Drang said he gives the generous gift of self in the way of light, wisdom, and compassion. I hope I got that right. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I love that. Yeah, giving our light to other, being, sharing our wisdom, what we know.
Yeah, and being compassionate of the other person.
Oh,
right?
yeah, that's such a way of being generous.
It sure is. Yeah, it's such a beautiful gift.
Yeah, and then I wrote down, I added our skills. So that's a gift of self. Like if you're skilled at a certain thing, you know what I mean? Like I'm really good at doing spreadsheets and organizing things. So that's a gift that I can give to others to support whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
What would you say are one of your skills?
Getting out of the way. when you need to do all the presentations and things, I try to do whatever I can, and I realize it's probably best if I just move out of the way. No, I think one of my best skills is the ability to be present and listen.
Yes, be present
and be curious.
Yeah, and I think one of your skills too is like really looking at things from different perspectives and being open to that. And I think and you've taught me how to do that, and you do that to me all the time. Like the situations we came into yesterday and other things that were a little more troubling, you always have the ability to look at it sort of like not distance yourself in a way that you can look objectively and be curious about things. And I think that's a super amazing skill.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So
yay.
Yeah, so that was number 10. Yeah. So just a few other thoughts. I think we talked about it at the beginning, but generosity is not to be confused with people pleasing.
Right.
I think people get into situations where they feel their value is by being generous and giving all the time. And I think that, but then what can happen if you do that is that you could hold resentments around that when it's not returned, you know? And yeah, I think there's a balance in that. Because sometimes I think people feel that pleasing others, it gives them their value.
Yeah,
and I think that's where it becomes difficult for people.
And that makes me think about the idea of the people pleasing, of how we might be, as people pleasers, sometimes reluctant to advocate for ourselves, as it might be considered being selfish, when in fact it might be self-preserving. And we need to be self-preserving.
Yes.
Yeah, so be generous to others, but don't neglect yourself on it.
Yeah. So I think then, what happens when we feel that we're doing all the giving and not getting or having our needs met.
Right. And then, as you say, resentments could be born there, and they could, turn into very toxic aspects of a relationship. So then we're going to learn how to announce our preferences, what we're wanting and not wanting. But I think that might have to be another episode.
Exactly. Announcing what we want, and don't assume that other people know what it is we need or want. That will make you feel supported. People are not mind readers. And I think, asking for the things, and, there's always a possibility that people will say no or will not meet the needs, but then you have a decision, you have an option, you have options to take in that moment. But we can't sit around and wait for our needs to be met if they're not being met. I think
no, you're right. We're not mind readers, and it's a squeaky wheel that gets it well. So announce for yourself, advocate for yourself. You're well within your rights to do it. Really reasonable, but yes, we need to hear from you.
Right. So that was 10 great quick ways. It wasn't that quick. Wow, 45 minutes. I'm surprised we talked this long. So if you're having a hard time feeling generous, given some situations like some of the ones we described, like if you're having overwhelming feelings or that sort of thing, you can always reach out and chat with us, send us a DM, and we're happy to, book a call or something and help you work through those things, at least get you to the next action that will help you get beyond that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's not easy.
Awesome. Well, thanks for watching. If you're watching in the replay and just caught the end of us, we'll be here in the featured section of the group. That's where all the newest recording trainings are, and the rest are in the
guides.
The guides. Although I heard that Facebook's getting rid of the guides and call it something different, or might get rid of it altogether. I hope not, because that's where all our stuff is. We'll have to.
Also, I just learned where they are, so don't get rid of it now.
Have a amazing Monday, and we'll see you at the same bat time this week. And please keep sharing how you like to be generous, because I think it'll inspire others.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go with with love in your heart.
Love in your heart. All right.
Thank you.
Talk later.
Bye.
Bye.